My name is Barbara Velazquez. Your microphones and chat with other audience members are turned off, but please send your questions to moderator Barbara Velazquez at any time for the discussion after the film. Also, watch for a link in the chat for an online evaluation. Your feedback is very important to us. Did you know that every single piece of plastic that has ever been created since the 19th century is still somewhere on our planet? So if it never goes away, where does it go? Today, we will view the documentary Plastic Paradise, The Great Pacific Garbage Patch to consider answers to that question. After the screening, Craig Moody from Verdis Group will join us for discussion and Q&A. Thousands of miles away from civilization, Midway Atoll is one of the most remote places on Earth, and yet it has become ground zero for the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, siphoning plastics from 3 distant continents. In this independent documentary film, journalist, filmmaker Angela Sun travels on a personal journey of discovery to uncover this mysterious phenomenon. Along the way, she meets scientists, researchers, influencers, and volunteers who shed light on the effects of our rabid plastic consumption and learns the problem is more insidious than we could have ever imagined. Please jot down your thoughts and questions for the final discussion. It's time to watch Plastic Paradise, The Great Pacific Garbage Patch. So as we're letting the credits roll, I'd like to introduce Mr. Craig Moody, who is the managing partner of Verdis Group, founded in 2009 as a consulting firm to help organizations identify and implement sustainable solutions. He is responsible for the firm's day-to-day operations and is well-versed on the topics of ESG, corporate social responsibility, organizational strategy, and decarbonization. Craig serves on the board of directors for the Omaha Public Power District, the Lorenzen Gardens, and Gretchen Swanson Center for Nutrition. He also is on the board of trustees for the Omaha Business Ethics Alliance. Craig received the 2019 Energy Leadership Award from Nebraska Conservation Voters, was a member of Lead Diversity and Leadership Omaha, received an Omaha JC's 10 Outstanding Young Omahans Award, and was honored by the Midlands Business Journal as a 40 under 40 recipient. He holds a Bachelor of Business Finance and a master's degree in business administration from the University of South Dakota. So welcome, Craig.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
And everybody, I want to encourage you, look under the chat for moderator Barbara Velazquez to send your questions or comments. It's good to see the people who are out there. I know some of you have long-standing interest in protecting our world, and this discussion will make this even richer. Craig, just your first impressions of this documentary, please, would you share that with us?
Yeah, I hadn't watched it before today. It definitely kind of slapped me upside the head a little bit. Thinking about 5 tons of plastic per year showing up on that island was pretty mind-blowing. I'm also not surprised. I've been doing this work for a long time and have a pretty decent grasp of what our environmental challenges are, broadly speaking, in the world right now, and this is but one of them. and it's an important one. It's also connected to many of the other ones, right? A lot of these environmental challenges are very intertwined, which means so are the solutions. And the solutions are there, they're present, they're known. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of gut wrenching, but it's also not surprising. So perhaps that's the dark side of the coin, I suppose.
We have a couple of questions, and I don't know if these are questions that we'll be able to answer, but
Sure.
do you know why the birds are attracted to plastic?
Oh yeah, I wish I was smart enough and educated enough to know the answer to that question, but I just don't. Sorry.
I will say, I was really irritated by the comment from one of the business people. Let's see, I wrote it.
Yeah, that was a stupid bird.
Pretty dumb
that comment.
bird.
Yeah. Yep.
Should not be
Agreed.
eating plastic.
It was
Yeah.
very cold. Yeah. Agreed.
And do we have any idea how many birds die annually?
Again, I don't. Yeah. I don't know.
Okay. So, and I wondered some of these things too. And again, I don't know if we have the answers, but I wonder how the island gets rid of the plastic. Does it just sit there? Does it get loaded onto ships and repurposed in some manner?
Again, don't know. I have a lot of the same logistical questions. I was just trying to wrap my head around the sheer volume and weight of what that island was experiencing on such a small island in a remote place. But exactly how it gets moved off of the island and where it goes, don't know. I don't know.
I think that also is a reflection of the comments that came up about how terribly expensive it would be to do what our first thoughts are. Like, okay, let's clean it up, let's get it out of here.
Mm-hmm.
So one of our attendees heard you say that solutions are known for many of the problems that we have. Could you elaborate on some of those solutions? And
yeah,
maybe
sure.
some of the problems.
Yeah, well, starting with kind of the central theme of the film, the problem that the film was identifying is plastics, right? And more than a few times within the film, it was discussed the importance of going to the source, right? And we work with many really large organizations, the size of, if not larger than MCC, and the amount of time, energy, resources that goes into managing materials at the end of their useful life is ridiculous. We spend so much time setting up waste and recycling systems, composting systems, investing in education and containers and signage, and then all of the expense and emissions associated with hauling those things once we finally get them into the right containers, right? We're dealing with it at the very end of the problem. It has to be dealt with at the source. It has to be dealt with at the point of purchasing, and that goes to the responsibility, in my opinion, that we as consumers have for making different decisions as to what we're buying. But it's also institutional. I think organization, a lot of there's a lot of volume and a lot of money exchanges hands when it comes to purchasing goods by institutions as well. So I think it really needs to go back to that. It's the source. Now that's easier said than done, right? Because the alternatives in some cases are more expensive, they're harder to find. We're hearing a lot of stories about organizations who, I'll use one silly example, but it's very common, styrofoam coffee cups in the break room. Still exist. We have a lot of people who are trying to figure out a way to get rid of that. They have intentions of doing it. They've identified a different alternative, one that is compostable, sustainable, or in fact reusable. But they're running into supply chain issues with those kinds of things because, and this is the good side, demand is through the roof. That to me is one of the other things that I think is one of the notes that I jotted down as I was watching the film is it painted a pretty dark picture of what's been happening. I'd also note that the film was, I think, done in 2014, and you'd be shocked at how much has changed since then. And markets have come a long ways in terms of alternatives. Consumer awareness is grown rapidly in terms of issues related to this. And the organizations, the companies that are manufacturing these products, and maybe I shouldn't hold them up, but organizations writ large, companies are absolutely leaning into and taking meaningful action on improving the way in which they show up in the world, right? It's not strictly anymore for many of these companies about the almighty dollar that they're trying to make. We're seeing a pretty big shift. And so while we're not there yet, while there's a heck of a lot of work to do, I guess going back to the original question, your dollars do speak. They do. And part of what has been happening is those dollars are going to organizations, to companies that have a finer focus on the benefits of environmentalism and what they're doing. And so that industry is growing. The organizations that are pivoting towards that, they've taken notice, and they're making different business decisions as a result, which I think is a good sign.
Are there any organizations or businesses that you feel we should know about because of their admirable work?
Yeah, one of the ones that I've always been intrigued by is Unilever. Massive company, right? But one of the former CEOs in particular really kind of set the stage for directing Unilever towards a posture of being net positive to the world. And he actually wrote a book called Net Positive, which I think I have in my bag. Do I have it in my bag? Look at this. Yeah, it's right here. I'm not getting a commission, by the way, but it's all about, the central question is the world a better place as a result of your organization's presence in it? And that can be dissected many ways, right? It can be dissected through an environmental lens, which is really kind of our focus today, but it can also be dissected through a racial justice lens, and through an equality lens, and through a poverty lens. I mean, all of these different systems that exist in the world, the basic premise is your organization, and this is again a shift that's happening in the business world. It's not strictly about driving money to the shareholders of that organization. It's about the organization, or companies now have a different definition for what their job is in the world, and that's to improve the community, to improve the world. It's a different definition of business that I learned when I went through business school. And so Unilever, the CEO, is someone who I really am impressed by the way that they show up. It's a journey though, right? And so they're on that journey. I'll hold another one up that's a little bit that's local. First National Bank. I think First National Bank does a wonderful job of thinking about how they show up in the world and the things that they can do to drive towards it being a net positive contributor to the world. I think First National Bank for years has had a very sort of community focused mentality. Privately owned, family owned, and really gives a lot back to the community in a variety of different ways. And I think they're, again, on this journey of continuing to explore how all of this implicates their business and their business model. From an environmental standpoint, you know, we work with them. So somewhat selfishly, I can talk about the fact that they've set some really impressive and aggressive goals around sustainability to reduce their emissions, to reduce waste, and they're making significant strides after those goals were set. So a little bit smaller, but closer to home, that's an institution that, you know, everybody in Omaha knows, but perhaps may not necessarily know about all the good things that they're doing. for the world right now.
Thank you. Appreciate that. That's it's good for us to know because we can support what they're doing, etc.
Sure.
So Lorraine sends a message. A Dutch teenager founded a nonprofit ocean cleanup company that removes plastics and I believe recycles them. There are many good videos on that. She might still be sending some more because I think that's not the end of her statement. So we'll come back to that.
Okay.
Are you familiar with this particular project? Maybe
I'm not. No.
okay, she's sharing his name. It's
Okay.
Boyan, Boyan, last name Slatme. So
Great.
I will send that out to everybody in case anybody wants to look that up.
Yep.
I think that you might get that now.
Mhm.
So COVID hit the world and many of us were more isolated, maybe working from home. And one of the first things that crossed my mind, because of all the protections, the masks, the et cetera, I just thought, I mean, nobody was using regular plates in any restaurants or anything anymore. I was really concerned about the impact it would have on the increased amounts of garbage. Is there any research on that?
I haven't seen any necessarily. I think that part of, there are probably two ways to look at it. We could undoubtedly look at production or sales figures for the materials that you're identifying, and that's probably easier to arrive at than is the much murkier area of trying to understand what's actually going to the landfill. We work in this industry all the time, and that piece of it is notoriously difficult to get data, right? So, thinking again about the college, we often try to understand what does the college produce on an annual basis in terms of what goes to the landfill, what gets recycled, composted, reused, et cetera. And that it's just a terrible area to collect data. So logically, to your point, undeniably, there was a pretty meaningful uptick in the volume of disposables used for safety reasons, right? That's just, it is what it is. I think we're probably migrating a little bit back from that a little bit. But I do have concerns about the extent to which some of those decisions will become permanent. And organizations, people will sort of, their new norm is not one that's conducive to a net positive posture, right? So yeah, I think your hunch is probably spot on. I don't necessarily have data to support it per se.
Yeah, and I mean, the US already was a leader in throwaways, I would assume, right? So I'm trying to think of what years it was that Metro had a small exchange activity with Austrian students from Austria. And we were sitting in someplace where you could eat, and they were speaking of how astounded they were. This was probably mid 90s, maybe.
Yeah.
That where they ate, everything was throwaway. They said, we don't do this. We have regular plates and cups and glasses. It doesn't matter if it's fast food or something, that's just a snack. And it's just got much worse. Besides the fact that many people were eating out, so that was more plastic bags, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You did say this film was 2014, and it mentioned that China was taking our plastic waste, but this attendee has read they don't do that anymore. Do you know if that's the case?
Yeah, that's definitely the case. Boy, I'm gonna get the year wrong, but I think it was probably in 2017-ish. It was called the China Sword Policy. China really just locked down on any any acceptance of mixed recyclables from the United States. And they basically said, look, what you're sending us is mostly garbage, and we're not going to accept it anymore. So halted it at the border, and the ripple effects were significant through the recycling industry, really significant. So new markets have really kind of had to find their place that are more domestic as that end market for a recyclable, right? Wherever it goes to get remanufactured into something new. That was mostly happening in China before, and so it's shifted rather dramatically to be more domestic, and it's recovered. I would say that, you know, she made the point in the documentary, and this may have been the case in 2014, that the only recyclables were, I think, the numbers 1 and 2. You know, you see that little number on the bottom. Yeah, there's a downgrading for plastics, to be sure, but the reality is the vast majority of plastics are in fact recyclable. Now, whether there are good systems in place to capture them and actually recycle them is a whole nother issue. But from a technical standpoint, the science exists, the technology exists in order to recycle plastics of all forms and fashions. And in Omaha in particular, we've got, many of you might be familiar with the Orange Bag, the Energy Bag program. That's growing, and my understanding is they're close to investing in the equipment needed to turn those plastics into, you know, I think we saw earlier, decking, plastic decking for your decks. That's a fantastic use as far as I'm concerned for what those are like. That doesn't necessarily mean that we stop worrying about it at the source, as we talked about, but those materials are going to continue. And so the extent to which we can capture them and turn them into something productive, I think is a big opportunity. We've been using that program at home for a couple of years. And here's what I would tell you about our experience with it. It is eye-opening how much soft plastic my family of 4 goes through in a couple of weeks. And a lot of times when I have in-person talks like this, I'll bring a sleeve of these orange bags and I'll give a bag to everyone. And my only hope is that you can, for a week or two, go through that process of just like siphoning those out of your garbage and putting them into a different bag, just to kind of get a sense for how many we interact with in any given day. It is unbelievable.
So Craig, for years and years before even recycling was like commonplace, I always tried to follow all the rules and find the places to take things that were not picked up at that time. Mm-hmm. Just today, I was reading about the orange bag. So I'm behind on that. I didn't know about it. Can you explain to everybody out here, because we all want to know what we can do. Maybe just in general, what are our options? What do we have if we're living in the city of Omaha?
Yeah, I'll drop something into the chat here in a moment. If you live in the city of Omaha and you get service from, where'd my cursor go? Service from the city of Omaha for trash side collection, you can, and this, we could have a debate about the merits of this and whose responsibility is and who should be paying. So let's set that aside for now. You can go to a grocery store and buy a roll of these energy bags, bring them home, and then once you fill it with all of the soft plastics that you go through in any given week, and again, it's bread bags, it's candy wrappers, it's, you know, sometimes Amazon, some of the inside packaging, anything that's not a rigid plastic. It can go in the orange bag. And then when you set your recyclables out every 2 weeks, you stuff it in there, tie it up, and put it in with all of your other recyclables. And eventually, once it gets to First Star Fiber, which is where all of the city of Omaha's residential curbside recycling goes, they're able to grab it, pull it out, and eventually, right now, it's, I believe, the latest is it's going to a cement kiln near Kansas City, which is not good. It's not what we want because it puts really terrible pollutants into the air, no doubt about it. But what they're trying to do is grow the market so that they can have a reliable stream, invest in the equipment needed to then stop sending them to Kansas City and then start turning them into a reusable product like the plastic lumber that I mentioned earlier. So again, it's on the, this is one of those situations where it's on the consumer to go buy the bags, right? But once you buy the bags and use them, I mean, it takes me 3 to 4 weeks to fill one up. So, 12 bags per year is really what we're going through, and that's nominal. And we capture, I mean, like I said, it's eye-popping what 2 adults and a couple little kids go through in any given week.
And in those trash cans with the green lids, what kind of plastic specifically should be going in there, or other recyclables?
Yeah, that's aluminum. That's your hard plastics. So I think that's 1s, 2s, 3s, and 5s primarily is what they're interested in. That's where the market is right now. And cardboard, paper. So those are the big, the quote unquote big 4: plastic, paper, aluminum, and cardboard.
Anything that's not a 1, 2, 3, or 5 plastic then should go in the orange bag.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to a certain extent, the best line that I can draw for you is rigid plastics and soft plastics, right? And rigid, there are more than 1, 2, 3s, and 5s. There are 4s and 6s and 7s, I believe. And so again, this is one of those situations where there's a difference between what is technically recyclable and what will get recycled when it goes down all the way through the stream, right? And there's a difference. And it's different for each market in the country, right? What's recyclable in Omaha might be different than what's recyclable in Lincoln versus Des Moines. It's very regionally specific oftentimes. And so right now in Omaha, the market is really for 1s, 2s, 3s, and 5s, at least from a plastic standpoint.
So we are kind of running out of time, but because your company is working with Metropolitan Community College, we have a lot of people on who are staff, and there was a class with students, but I think that they've left to debrief independently. What recommendations do you have for us on college campuses? What are we What should we be doing better?
Short answer is I don't know. We're just getting started. Our work has very much shifted, though, in response to kind of what the industry is moving towards and what the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is talking about. And that to me is the big issue that we collectively need to tackle, is how can we mitigate the greenhouse gas emissions that we're putting in the atmosphere? And part of that is about the production and transportation of plastics. So it's mitigating the bad, but it's also starting to acknowledge that the climate crisis is in fact unfolding right in front of our eyes as we speak. And so let's acknowledge that, because it's fact. And what's important for institutions, we're seeing this happen a lot, is in light of that acknowledgement, we need to start preparing. We need to start thinking about ways for our organization, our institution, our systems, our infrastructure, our people, our constituents to be resilient, to be adaptive to the fact that this is unfolding. So we call that climate adaptation and resilience. So there's mitigation, let's do less bad. And then there's resilience and adaptation, acknowledging that it's going to be worse for a while. Hope is not lost. We get out in front of this, but it's going to take the work of individuals, and it's going to take the work of systems and organizations and everyone in between for us to really avoid the worst of it. And on that note, I'll just share really quickly in the chat. A lot of people ask me, what can I do? What's the most important thing that I can do as an individual? I just shared a link to an infographic that really answers that question. It's through a lot of research. Project Drawdown has done a wonderful job of identifying those things that will have the biggest effect on mitigating climate emissions. And that's what this little infographic is. It's your menu. It's your menu of things you can do.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And that may have been what you wanted to share with us as a final comment, but did you have anything else you wanted to say, Craig?
No, that's what I wanted to share. I think that's the most important thing is time is of the essence, and it's going to take action on the part of individuals, organizations, politicians, and leaders. I mean, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. It's doable. The technology is known, the answers are known, but we got to get going. The good news is that, again, we're seeing a lot of action. So people are moving, but we got to keep going. We got to keep going faster.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. And I want to thank you for stepping in with Sally's leaving from Metro, but we're thankful for her for making the connection too. We're excited about the college working with your organization. And everybody who's here today, thanks for prioritizing your time in the afternoon. Take this message out. For those of you who are Metropolitan Community College staff, faculty, or students, you may see this video or share it again with others by going through the library's perpetual streaming licenses. So this isn't the end. I cannot give you the link, but you can access it through the library.